All right, let's start with Judge Theodore Chuang's ruling. This decision is making waves for good reason. The central argument: Elon Musk, in his capacity as helm of the Department of Government Efficiency, exceeded constitutional bounds by effectively dismantling USAID. Play this clip.
And Elon Musk is not one of those. So the government tried to say, well, he wasn't really in charge of Doge. And of course, then plaintiffs came back with all of this evidence that Trump and Elon Musk and other people said, yes, he's running the show here. So I think they put their case together very well. And the judge also said that this violated the separation of powers because when Congress created USAID, they said that to make major changes to it, there had to be consultation with Congress. That, of course, wasn't done either. So I think legally it was a very, very well put together case, and they won.
And this ruling, what kind of a roadmap does it provide for others who want to challenge actions by Elon Musk and his team?
Well, it's important to pick the right plaintiffs, right, and go to court, make sure you have standing, make sure you have irreparable injury as you're asking for injunctions like this. So I think it does provide that kind of a roadmap. I hope it also provides some lessons for the government in this case that they need to be more careful. It's not that they can't dismantle USAID, to be honest. They can, as long as they follow the proper procedures. This is really about procedural issues and not the substantive issues, but they have to do it properly. And if they do it properly, they will avoid a lot of the harms that we've seen play out with all of the chaos that has enveloped the country.
And that really gets to the second issue here, the practical impacts of it. Practically speaking, you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube, really, with USAID, can you?
Well, they're going to have to rehire some people and so on. They can pay their bills that they hadn't paid and that sort of thing. So some of the damage will be mitigated. But yeah, they're going to shut this down or at least cut it back drastically. And they're allowed to do that if they do it the right way.
And the church basically even laid out a roadmap for them to do it. Say, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, this is the way you do this in the next 2 weeks, if you want to. This also might be a little bit of a lesson in, bare knuckle politics here. How much you can accomplish before a judge weighs in, because the Trump administration already did what it wanted it to do here.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, listen, I do hope that all of these rulings that are coming down, not just in this case, but in other cases, will cause them to slow down and do things more carefully and do it the right way. I was also very heartened to see that in response to this, they said that they would appeal and not defy the judge's order, which I think is important. So, listen, yes, hopefully they will do things more appropriately, and then that will mitigate the harms.
This ruling openly challenges Musk's legal authority to take such action, largely because, he wasn't properly appointed under the Constitution's Appointments Clause. That clause, if you are unfamiliar, safeguards the separation of powers by ensuring that only duly approved officials can wield what's considered significant government authority. Here's where it gets especially eyebrow-raising. Musk's role wasn't confirmed by the Senate, which is a pretty critical step if we're talking about someone wielding what's essentially a veto power over a whole federal agency. Judge Chuang ruled that Musk's actions usurped Congress's rights, basically bypassing the elected representatives of the American people, and in doing so, made decisions that no singular executive should be permitted to handle alone. It's honestly a stark example of potential executive overreach. Now, let's talk about what this ruling means practically. First, the court ordered Musk and the Department of Government Efficiency team to undo some of the chaos they've caused. This includes reinstating email and system access for USAID employees who've been quite literally locked out of their own workspaces. But, and this is key, the broader damage remains. 80% of USAID's programs are reportedly already cut or halted, and many of the agency staff were laid off long before the courts had time to intervene. So, a pause on action from Musk does not restore what's already lost. And the people most affected? The employees. From what I've seen, their testimonies couldn't be clearer. One described the dismantling as, and I quote, surgery with a chainsaw instead of a scalpel. Judges might argue it's unconstitutional. Yes, but workers describe it as pure chaos. The kind where you lose the ability to access grants that could have sent food or medicine overseas, or where key humanitarian programs just stop. leaving vulnerable communities without life-saving aid. I mean, imagine it. It isn't just policy wonks arguing over clauses in laws. It's frontline workers who built systems to fight diseases or rebuild schools, seeing everything come to a grinding halt. That's where governance meets ethics, because what's the cost, really, of pulling the rug out from under these programs? And are we, as a nation, willing to accept that cost? And USAID's work, when it was in full swing, was nothing short of transformative. Let me paint you a picture here. Since its founding in 1961, this agency has impacted lives across more than 130 countries. Programs like PEPFAR, if you've heard of it, have saved an estimated 25 million lives. That's millions of mothers, fathers, kids, entire families who might not be here today without access to antiretroviral drugs or maternal health care funded by USAID dollars. When it comes to education, the ripple effects of USAID are massive. They've rebuilt devastated schools, developed teacher training initiatives, and funded textbooks in conflict zones. We're talking about kids who, instead of being pulled into cycles of poverty or violence, get a shot, just a shot, at a better life. And let's not forget governance programs that have encouraged democracies to flourish. We saw this, in countries emerging from oppressive regimes and needing stable foundations to rebuild justice systems. But then there's the flip side. 80%, yes, 80% of these operations have been slashed under the Department of Government Efficiency's policy shifts. And here's where things get grim. That massive aid, those monumental life-saving efforts, gone. What we're left with is this eerie silence where once there was a lifeline for vulnerable populations. We're witnessing a withdrawal of U.S. influence abroad, and with that, a ripple effect on global stability. History already handed us a cautionary tale through the UK's dismantling of DFID, its humanitarian arm. People called it cost-cutting, but 5 years later, it's clear there's less money, less impact, and global respect's out the window. Personally, I've seen what USAID money can do. Years ago, I spent weeks volunteering alongside a local NGO in Central Africa, supported by USAID funding. We trained women, survivors of gender-based violence, as healthcare ambassadors. These women, let me tell you, were warriors, spreading life-saving medical knowledge to their villages and giving voice to silence crises. USAID didn't just inject cash, it built systems. It empowered people who had every reason to give up, and it showed up where few others were willing to tread. So, let's just stop and ask ourselves for 1 minute, what happens when these systems, these networks of hope, are gutted? Because that's not just an organizational shift, that's lives, countless ones thrown into chaos. And it begs the question, are we looking at a future where the United States no longer plays a lead role in the humanitarian stage? What does that say about us? When we look at USAID, it's not just numbers on a spreadsheet. It's a global embassy of compassion. Foreign aid, as a policy tool, has always carried a dual mission: humanitarian relief and strategic diplomacy. But here's the tricky part. How do you balance those roles ethically? Critics will argue, and fairly so, that politicizing aid dilutes its primary focus, that we end up cherry-picking recipients based on alliances rather than need. It's a slippery slope, because what happens when aid becomes less about uplifting humanity and more about scoring geopolitical points? Let's take Gaza and Ukraine as two stark examples. In Gaza, we've witnessed airstrikes decimating what little infrastructure is left, often leaving civilians, innocent families, scrambling for resources. And in Ukraine, continued aggression has torn apart their energy grid just as a bitter winter looms. Scaling back international assistance isn't some abstract policy choice. For these people, it's the difference between survival and suffering. Aid isn't just a foreign policy instrument. It's a moral lifeline. And when we fail to uphold that, the cost isn't borne by governments. It's borne by communities who've done nothing to bring this on themselves. But let's probe the big philosophical question. Is it America's role to shoulder this responsibility? I mean, do we have an obligation beyond national interest to step in when the world falters? Every time I see firsthand the impact of healthcare missions, I think about this. In my years of activism, working to bridge care gaps globally, it strikes me over and over. If not us, then who? Sure, let's be real. No system is perfect, but imperfection isn't a justification for abandonment. It's a call to innovate, to refine, not retreat. At its heart, this debate is about identity. Are we the kind of nation that sees suffering across oceans as someone else's problem? Or are we the country that believes in shared humanity, that invests in a future where prosperity doesn't stop at our borders? Because the thing about global interconnectedness, it cuts both ways. Neglecting crises abroad doesn't shield us. It boomerangs back, destabilizing regions and fostering resentment in ways that ripple far wider than we can predict. So, as we wrap up this conversation, I'll leave you with this. The dismantling of USAID raises profound questions, not just about the agency's future, but about us as a country. When policies stand at the crossroads of ethics and efficiency, are we willing to choose the harder, nobler path? And more profoundly, are we still a people who believe it's worth fighting for? I, for one, certainly hope the answer remains yes. That wraps up today's episode of The Real 411. I want to personally thank each and every one of you for tuning in and for your continued support. It means more than you know. If you found value in today's discussion, please drop a comment, follow us on all social media platforms, and let us know what topics you'd like to see us cover next. Be sure to sign up for our email newsletter so you never miss an update or exclusive insight. And if you believe in independent media that digs deeper and dares to tell the truth, please consider following The Real 411 on Substack and Fanbase. We offer both free and paid subscriptions, and your support helps us continue producing content that informs, empowers, and sparks real conversation. Thanks again for being part of this journey, because remember, the story is never just the headline. Until next time, stay informed, stay bold, and stay real.